Do you want to plant seeds fast, get great germination, manage weeds easily, and harvest loads of blooms? If that's you, stick around because today I'm sharing my best tips for direct seeding flower seeds on your cut flower farm. So I've spent the last 6 years experimenting with direct seeding on my flower farm in West Michigan, Zone 6A. Last season, I sold over 25,000 stems from my farm directly to florists, and direct seeding plays a key role in making that possible. Let me tell you how it works. So just to get us a little bit of a few definitions, the method I'm talking about is direct seeding. What is direct seeding? So very briefly, direct seeding is taking seeds directly and planting them directly onto bare soil in your garden. So you're not starting them in sides with little transplants and having lights. It's just putting the seed directly into the ground, into the garden. And the method that I'm going to show you about, I'm going to be talking about doing this with a certain type of flower, often referred to as cool flowers, cool hardy annuals, something along those lines. So what is a cool flower? That's the next question. Well, a cool flower is an annual flower that you start from seed every year. However, this flower thrives on growing in or starting to grow in cool climates or cool temperatures, and then even into cold, freezing winter weather, it will remain alive. And then in the spring, they will start to grow. So there's a couple different things that you can talk about here. First of all, I learned a lot about cool hardy annuals before I started flower farming from Lisa Mason Ziegler and her book, Cool Flowers, which I have right here, which is one of my favorites. I must say she has newer books that are more in depth, I think. And this was just her very first book specifically about cool flowers. And this was a great resource for me. However, Lisa lives and farms in Virginia in zone 7 or 8, I believe. And so she has a very, very different growing zone and different things that affect her farm and flowers than I do in West Michigan. So I'm going to be sharing all the tips and tricks about what works here in a colder zone. So there's a couple things that you need to know before you start your cool flower seeds. One is you need to know your frost dates and you need to know what zone you live in. So in the United States, we have something called USDA hardiness zones. It's not like this in every country, but it's basically tells you like it's a measurement based on how cold you get in the winter. And so I'm in zone 6A, and basically I think that goes down to like -20 or something, or -10, maybe it's -10, and something like that. And so those zones are based on your how cold you get in the winter. And then you have something called your frost dates. So your last frost date is often referred to as the last time you get frost in the spring. And you can learn this by Googling your zip code. And that's your last average frost date. So for me, it's around May 15th in Michigan. So you could live in the same zone as I do, and you could have a much bigger window of a frost-free date than I do. So for me, my last frost date in the spring is around May 15th, and then my first frost date in the fall is around October 15th. And that's our average first fall frost, kind of like a killing frost. So once you know your frost dates and you know your hardiness zone, then you need to figure out what is a cool flower. So which flowers are cool flowers? Well, there's actually lots of them. And if you're walking around your garden or your farm in the spring and you see certain things starting to germinate and grow at 2 months before your last spring frost, those are probably cool flowers because they're stimulated by the natural environment to germinate and start growing. Well, they know that it's not going to be they know it's not 60 degrees at night and 90 during the day. They know it's cold, but that's what they like best to grow in. So sometimes it's fun just to look around and see what is germinating. Do I have sunflowers germinating? What's germinating? And then that gives you a tip about the flower and how it likes to best perform on its own in nature. But there's lots of cool flowers. I'm not going to talk about them all, but Lisa has an entire book about them, and there's more books like this, but there's a lot of them. But I am now going to talk about how I do it in different successions, and then I will tell you exactly what I grow on my farm in this way. So you can do multiple successions of this, but you have to know your hardiness zone. So I like to start as many of these as I can in the fall, and I usually like to have them in the ground by September 1st, because remember, my first frost in the fall, my average first frost is mid-October. So I like to have things in the ground and getting germinated and growing before that, because they do actually need some kind of warmth to germinate them. This is typical. I'm going to give you some exceptions to this, but they need some kind of warmth for them to germinate. So I sow a bunch of them in the fall, but you have to know your hardiness zone, because some of these are not as hardy as others. So some of them can't make it through the winter, they will die. Others of them can. And then you can plant them in the spring, and they say, like, as soon as you can work the soil, you can plant cool hardy annuals. So for me, today it's March 20th. It's snowing. I don't know if you can actually see, there's bits of snow on the ground today. It's the first day of spring, and we got snow, of course. But yesterday it was 70 degrees, and it was nice last week. And I was able to get in on March 11th, was the very first time that I could get in and work the soil. I'm going to show you that in videos, like actually out in the garden, how I do this. But I couldn't sow seeds any earlier than that, because we had snow cover, or our ground was absolutely frozen, or it was frozen mud. You can't plant seeds in that. So, but now I can. Yesterday I planted a whole bunch of seeds. I seeded a bunch of beds, several beds, because it's nice. Even though it snowed today, it's okay, that I planted them yesterday, because they're cold hardy plants and they haven't germinated yet, and they actually like this kind of weather. So I do a fall succession of most of them if I can, if it's hardy to my zone. And again, I plant those 6 weeks before my first fall frost day, and then in the spring as early as you can work the soil. So I'm about 8-9 weeks before my last frost day, and I sowed some a week ago. So as soon as you can work the soil and it's dried enough for you to do that, you can plant these cool hardy things. And then what I do is I often do second successions of most of these flowers, and depending on the year and how warm the spring is will depend on when these will germinate. So I usually wait and I watch for when my direct seeded beds start to germinate, and then about 2 weeks after they germinate, maybe 3, I sow second successions of most of these plants. And I'm going to go into every single flower and exactly how I do each one. So to recap here, you need to know your frost dates, your spring and fall frost dates. You need to know your hardiness zone to know if the direct seeded plant that you're trying to plant will overwinter. And then you need to know what flowers are cool flowers. So the flowers that I direct seed on my farm that play really a key role into my farming is Bupleurum, Saponaria, Orlea, giant poppy pods, Nigella, and larkspur. Others that I have done in the past include bells of Ireland, Dara, and Gypsophila. So there are lots of other ones that you can do. That's what I have done on my farm. And then there's also cool flowers that do better, as transplants. And then you can still plant them in the fall, but we're not talking about that in this video. But just know, there's lots of other things that you can do here. So now I will get into every single one of those. I'm just going to give you a few tips here. So why would you want to direct seed? Why would you want to do this? Well, as you'll see from the videos coming up, this is a very fast way to plant. It's a very fast way to plant. It's very easy, and you can plant really early before your last frost dates. So I have almost all of my planted, and so I'm going to give you just a few really quick tips. One, if it's super, super windy, it's going to be extremely difficult to direct seed, because you're going to be trying to plant your seeds and they're going to blow away and they're not going to go where you want them to go, and then it's going to be a mess. So don't choose a super windy day. And the second tip is your beds have to be dry enough, so you don't want it to be mud. And third tip is, I don't do this, but I've heard Lisa talk about this and others, that once you plant the seeds, you can actually put frost cloth, just lay it right on the ground. You don't have to use hoops. You can put frost cloth over top of it until it germinates. And what you're doing is you're heating up the soil a little bit, but it's mostly to keep away the birds from eating the seeds, which I don't do that, but you can. So just know that. The negatives of this, well, it takes a lot of seed. It takes a lot more seed than, if you're transplanting, which to me isn't a problem, but you don't want to do this with a plant that has really, really, really expensive seed. That might be kind of a reason to not direct seed something. Another issue is a lot of places have a lot more perennial weed pressure than I do here in Michigan. And so that can just be a nightmare to direct seed because of their perennial weed problems. I know, for example, Lisa Mason Ziegler from the Gardener's Workshop, she lives in Virginia, and she directs seeds in the fall only. And then in the spring, she transplants because she can transplant into a weed management system instead of in open beds. Because when you're doing this, as I'm going to show you in the method, you're doing it in an open bed. There's no landscape fabric, and your weed management, it's actually very easy to manage the weeds if you stay on top of it. So your weed management involves hoeing, which I'm going to show you that exactly. But it can be a reason that some people are really almost unable to direct seed. The other thing is, sometimes in the spring, it can be really, really, really wet depending on the year. And if you just cannot get out there because your beds are so wet, that can be an issue. However, that's also an issue for transplanting and basically everything. But that can be an issue. But some people avoid this by prepping their beds in the fall, and that can help you be ready in the spring to get right out there. I'm going to just talk to you about a few issues that I've had before we go into out in the garden. So one of the issues I've had the last 2 years is my bupleurum that I planted in the fall seemed to get really poor germination, and I don't know why. And my spring planted bupleurum did a lot better. I'm not sure why I've been getting poor germination for the past 2 years, so I'm thinking through that. What can I do to try and get better fall germination? So when I look in my garden, I can see bupleurum naturally reseeding in the fall and coming up and continuing to survive the winter and grow into the spring. And it's amazing. So what I've considered doing is having an area where I can just have bupleurum that reseeds, because it seems to do really well that way. So if you have that, like if you have a natural reseeding area, and particularly if you have it with bupleurum, I would love to know how that works for you, because I'm just having some issues. I'm not sure why I'm having germination issues in the fall. One of the other cons is that when you fall plant these seeds, if at all possible, your fall planted flowers, they will stay really small over the winter. They will look completely frozen and just like frozen little green popsicles. They don't really, some of them will have some dieback, but they really stay really green. And the snow cover is great. Just to clarify, I do not cover these with hoops or frost cloth or low tunnels. This is just completely uncovered. If you would choose to put low covers over them, you would be able to probably be able to do stuff that was not hardy in your zone, and your stuff would come sooner. For example, I have some cold hardy annuals that I direct seeded into my tunnel this fall, and I'm really curious to see how they'll do. I did not cover them with frost cloth though inside my tunnel. So that's one of the benefits of it, is that your fall planted bupleurum compared to your spring planted bupleurum is going to be like the branchiest, tallest, most massive, amazing bupleurum that you have ever seen, hands down, in your life. I mean, it's amazing and it's huge. Your spring planted bupleurum will come like down a notch. And then if you go into a second succession, they keep going down. So now I'm going to get right into, I'm going to tell you specifically the crops that I specifically grow and how I grow them. So bupleurum, I fall plant that one. So my goal is like September 1st, even like the end of August. I feel like they do better when they start a little bit sooner. So September 1st, I plant Bupleurum. Again, no cover. And then in the spring, I do another succession of Bupleurum, and then I do a third succession of Bupleurum after that, and then I quit because Bupleurum doesn't really like the heat and it just gets smaller and stressed and doesn't do super well. And I have enough other foliage by that time. I don't really need it. Like, I have some perennial stuff. Then I do Saponaria, which I'll show you is this really airy filler that everybody loves. So this one is interesting. It is, I think, hardy to zone 6. And I actually planted it this past fall for the very first time in fall planting. Otherwise, I've only spring planted it because of its hardiness. And we were zone 5 and now we're zone 6. And so we'll see. It looks not the greatest, the stuff I fall planted. So I'm going to see how that goes. So I tried fall planting it. We'll see how that goes. But I have spring planted it super early, and it is so fast growing, and you'll have it so quickly. It's really amazing. So I plant it in the fall and then spring, and I plant this every 2 weeks. It goes for me fine all summer. It doesn't really have a decrease in quality. Then the next one is Orlea. So Orlea is the one exception. Orlea seeds are pretty expensive, but Orlea seeds are very big compared to the others. So Orlea seeds, I actually just like drop a seed, 6 inches, drop a seed, drop a seed. You'll see how I do all the other ones. That one I plant in the fall, in the spring, and then I do one more succession of it. It's great. Everybody loves it. You don't need a ton of like square footage of it because it's super, super productive. These are all super, super productive, but Orlea really is. Also, giant poppy pods are the next one. I do not fall plant them. They are not hardy. I think they're hardy to zone 7. But I spring plant them one time. I do one succession of poppy pods, and everybody loves them, and they're really great. And you can keep them in your cooler for like 6 weeks because you're not actually selling the flower. It's the pod. And so I do have them for a good a good while in June, but I just do one succession of them. So they're kind of like a specialty thing. And when they're gone, they're gone. And then the next one I do is larkspur, which is the one I'm actually going to plant in the video. I do that in the fall, but I like to actually wait. Interestingly, I wait in the fall to plant this until November. So it's not warm. It's actually very cold. And my goal is to simply get the seeds in the ground, and then in the spring, they'll jump and germinate. So I fall plant it and I spring plant it once, sometimes twice, usually just once. Then the next one is Nigella. So I actually have done some testing on Nigella, but I fall plant Nigella, I spring plant Nigella, and I had so much demand for Nigella that last summer I had an area, like just a small area of a bed, maybe 10 or 20 feet, and I planted it in the middle of the summer, and it actually bloomed after frost, so I wasn't quite on top of it enough, but I'm going to try and keep planting it this summer because I just had a lot of demand for Nigella, and you can sell the flowers, you can sell the pods, and it comes in so many great colors, and to me it's such an easy plant to grow, to harvest, to sell. So that just makes it really profitable. So I'm going to keep experimenting with how to do that. Others that I have done in the past is like Dara, and I have also done Bells of Ireland. If you don't know about the heartache of Bells of Ireland and flower farmers, usually Bells of Ireland get a fungal disease after the first couple of years that you grow them. And so they just like break all the flower farmers' hearts. And I just haven't tried to grow them because they get this fungal disease. But when I did grow them, I actually planted them one warm day in December, and I just kind of plunked them into the ground and they germinated really well. So you can also do this with Bells of Ireland. The other reason why you would want to do this is because it makes you super profitable, because the easier and the faster and the quicker that you can, seed and harvest flowers, it's just going to make you more profitable. Okay. I forgot a few things. The other seed that I direct seed is cress. There's different kinds of cress, penny cress, just a different cress. I'll show you a picture of it. It's super amazing. I actually just had a little bit of space last year and I just direct sowed this cress. It was enormous and it was amazing. And I was like, why don't I do this more? So that's the other really great thing about direct seeding, is always having seeds on hand. So that way, if you have a little space in the bed where either you had a failure or, like I had a perennial that failed. And so in the spring I had this like random 20 feet, or you're planting plugs and you get to like you have 10 feet left of the bed or something, you can always direct seed a couple of these. You can direct seed some of this, direct seed to stuff so you're not losing the bed space. Or the other tip is always put a cover crop in there if you have that space too. So I always keep cover crop on hand, but then if you're looking to have a cash crop, you can direct seed this as well. So one more tip. Now I'm going to show you exactly how I do this and the tools I use and exactly how I do it out in the garden. If you find this valuable, you might also find valuable my free guide, Tips for Selling Flowers to Florists, because that's what I do. I sell primarily to florists, and florists love all of these flowers. So you're not going to want to miss out on those. The link is in the description. And today I'm going to talk to you about direct seeding into this bed. It is the beginning of March here, middle of March, March 11 today. And I've been trying to direct seed for over a week. I've come out here 4 times seeing if it was possible, and it wasn't. So I'm pretty excited because today it looks like it's a great day to do it. So the soil has warmed enough for me to be able to dig in it. So the first time I came out here, only like the top 1/8 of an inch of soil was soft enough for me to even be able to get in there and do it. And then the next time it was too wet and all these different factors. So it has to be dry enough and you've got to be able to work the soil. So I'm going to be planting some larkspur and I'm going to show you how I do it. I cheated slightly and I did a little bit of it ahead of time. And I've already raked the bed once. And so I'm going to show you how I do it from here. I'm going to be using one of my favorite hoes. This is a Collier hoe, like an Elliott Coleman, I think, came up with this one. I got this from the Gardener's Workshop years ago, and I've used this for years and years. So a couple of tips when you're direct seeding. I use this hoe to do everything, including that I use it as a measurement to measure the space between my rows in order that I can weed with this tool as well. So this is my bed prep, planting, and weeding tool. So I'm going to just start by kind of brushing it out and raking it once. And then I do have a rake to make it really smooth. And then you'll see where I go from there. So I just move the drip line out of the way and get going. Okay, so now I'm done with that's sort of like a weeding bed prep. And now I'm just going to rake it out. I'm just going to rake it smooth with this, kind of using both ends of this just to have it as smooth as possible. Then I'm going to come back and make my troughs for planting, and then we'll go from there. All right, that was honestly pretty smooth to start with, but now it's really nice and smooth. All right, so now I'm back to this hoe. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 3 troughs in this bed. I'm going to make 3 troughs in this bed, and I'm going to make them about this far apart, maybe slightly more. So I basically just go down the middle and then measure out from there. I make 3 troughs, so they're about 8 or 10 inches apart. These are 36-inch beds, and they're about 65 feet long. And this is like my annual sort of ish turning into perennials, but area on my farm. So I will do that, and you can see how I do it. So I have one left, but I am using the point of this, dragging it through the bed to make a trough. So now you can see that I have 3 troughs here. They're not perfectly straight, they're not perfect, but this is good enough for me. So this is how I do it every time. And it works really well, and it's pretty fast. So next you grab your seeds. So I'm planting larkspur today, and I like to plant the same color in the 3 rows. So I just use a marker, like a random stick. Let's just be honest. I use like a random stick to find the marker, and then I change out my color. So I've got white, smoky eyes, and then dark blue. So those are the 3 colors I'm going to be doing. I just estimate about a third of the bed and then go from there, and then I do 1 row and then the next, and then you'll see what I do with the seeds to cover up. So some of these are from Johnny's, and I guess all these are from Johnny's. Sometimes I get them from Geoseed too. But today they're from Johnny's. So, and then Johnny's is great because on the back of the packet it tells you if I need to cover part of it out, because I had to fix something on my phone. But basically I was planting, but I'm still planting so you can still see. So the next thing I'm going to plant is the dark blue. This is the QIS dark blue. Probably going to need both of these packets. So I use random sticks. You can see my sunflower, like old sunflower stalks, are my marker. So I just kind of estimate out a third of the bed, a third of the bed, a third of the bed. And so that'll give me my 3 colors, and this entire 65-foot bed is larkspur. So I'll show you how I finish putting the seeds in the ground, and then there's one more step because they need darkness to germinate. So I'll show you in the end what I do. So what I do is I take my packet and I open it up, and then I dump a handful of seeds into the packet, and then I just take a pinch, and as I go down the row I just kind of make my fingers go like that, and then the seeds kind of fall out. You can kind of see it. So that's how I plant them. Step to direct seeding, and that is that you take your hoe, this hoe, my favorite hoe, and I'm going to cover the seeds because these require darkness to germinate. And then you'll see I like tap them in at the end. So I'm just going to very, very carefully take this corner tip of my hoe and put a little bit of soil on them. I'm not burying these an inch deep. I'm just trying like 1/8 of an inch of soil. And you just very carefully do that. And then I do tap it down to get good seed to soil contact. And then I will probably water them in. I don't have water hooked up out here yet, so that might be interesting. But we're going to get this far. So I just very carefully And that's it, folks. That's an entire bed direct seeded pretty much from start to finish. So I'm going to show you a bed that I've already done last fall, and then I'm going to move on to my next bed. This is a bed that I direct seeded last fall. This is Nigella, yes. And so the last half of it's not done. I'm actually going to do that one now too. But so you can see that I put my hoe in in the troughs, like in between the troughs, so that way I can hoe and weed it. This still does have some weeds, but this has come through the whole winter, zero cover. I do not cover any of this out here like this. And so it's great, but this is Bupleurum, and it will probably look better as time goes on. So those are a couple of examples of stuff that I direct seeded last fall and went through the winter. I also have Saponaria over there, and I have Orlea also. Why don't I show you those? And then this is Orlea, but I actually also had giant poppy pods here last summer, and a bunch of them reseeded. So I left some of them, and I'm just curious to see how they'll do. There's always a weed or two. It's so hard to not pull the weeds. But the Orlea looks really great here. So that's really... If you made it this far, welcome to the end of the video club. If you made it this far, congratulations. And if you would drop an emoji, if you would drop the farmer emoji, right? Isn't there one where they're like holding vegetables or something? Let's drop that one because we're all getting really excited for spring. So I really appreciate you guys. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.